Hello, welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. Have you ever wondered about what it would be like to be a spy? Maybe James Bond, the spy extraordinaire? My guest today at MLTV, Bill Wheatley, as a boy, dreamed of becoming a spy. In fact, his idol, his hero, was James Bond, so he read every book that Ian Fleming ever wrote. He lived his dream. After college, he went into the Navy, and from there he worked for the CIA in various parts of the world. What was life like? Was it James Bondish? Well, let's find out. Welcome, Bill, to 30 Minutes and to MLTV. Yours is a fascinating life. I don't know how much of it you can talk about because you spent 30 years undercover. However, were you really a spy in the truest sense of the word, living in the shadows in different parts of the world and different cultures?
Yes, I was. Not continuously. After active Navy, I then had a civilian career as an architect and construction manager. But I tended to work on large projects that were in interesting parts of the world, and the CIA would use me at those times to gather certain information while I was there. I've worked that way on every continent in the world except Antarctica. Most often either in Eastern Europe or in the Middle East, in Northern Africa. Most of it was boring.
Okay. Well, I find that hard to believe, but I think I understand what you mean.
Because as a spy, you try to blend in and not have anybody realize that you're a spy. You're just this dumb bloke doing a routine job.
I always thought that there was a perpetual code of silence, secrecy, that you couldn't divulge any aspect of your previous life.
There is, and I can't without permission. I published a book, as you know, and it took 10 years to get the approval for that, including sending draft after draft down for review. And finally, I understood that they would send me back a note saying, yes, we're going to let you write about this, but on page 137 of the typed text, in line 15, you say X, Y, and Z, and you can't say that. You have to say A, B, and C instead. And so I would get out the text and look at it and realize that that meant I had to go back to page 1 and start over. And so finally I developed the strategy of writing chapter 1, sending it. Once it was approved, then I did chapter 2 and sent it. And that took 4 years of writing and sending.
Wow. Well, 4 years. So did it...
They weren't fast in their review.
Yeah, did it span a couple of administrations then? Although I guess that doesn't matter.
That doesn't matter.
The administration.
The administration was not involved in it. This was mid-range people in the CIA.
It was the bureaucrats in place, the professionals, I should say.
Right.
Yes.
Professional bureaucrats.
Are there different types or levels of spies?
Yes.
Inside, outside?
Now, there are several basic types. There's the analyst, who generally works in an office in Washington, analyzing stuff, analyzing data mainly. It may be electronic data, it may be public source data. He'll work scanning the internet for tidbits that he puts together, or he'll tap into Putin's private line to his wife, and pick up on those conversations and see what he spills that he wouldn't talk to anybody else about. And the analysts then put together a picture of what the world is for the political leaders who have to make the decisions. They almost never get in the field. Sometimes a person who is in the field for one tour of duty will then turn analyst. He's been there, he knows what it's like in the field, so then he can look at the data with more educated eyes. But it's very rare for an analyst to then go to the field. I was never an analyst except to a certain degree as a naval intelligence officer on board a ship, which isn't really the field.
Mm-hmm.
We were following Russian submarines around and recording the sounds they made. And those then went to Washington and were fed into a computer. The idea being you would develop a catalog of the individual sounds that individual submarines would make, so you could identify them just by the sound they made on the sonar. In order to make that practical, you had to have a supercomputer on the ship, which you couldn't have back then. Now, a simple PC can do the
Sure.
job.
So you never worked for this. You weren't employed by the CIA. You
That's
worked
correct.
for or with the CIA.
I worked with the CIA
But you were in the Navy.
on assignment to the CIA
Right.
as a naval intelligence officer on special assignment, but also with a civilian career. So the CIA would pay the Navy would pay my employer, and my employer would pay me.
And that was as close as you could get to Ian Fleming's James Bond? The Navy, spy?
Right.
Is that it?
I was both Navy and a spy.
Yeah.
And James Bond was.
Yes. Oh, he was a commander.
He was a commander,
wasn't he?
right.
Yes.
Well, it was never clear what he commanded, but
In all those places, every place you mentioned has been a hot spot or is a hot spot around the world. How often did you feel unsafe, that you were at risk? I mean, really at risk, because you didn't have cover, right? If you had been found out, the government would disavow you.
Right.
You were not
I'd be on my
officially
own.
there. Right. So what was it like living that way day after day?
I didn't do it full time. I was never in a foreign country for a long period of time, except for Iran. And in all cases, I did have cover in the sense that I had a cover job, but I did not have diplomatic cover. Most CIA officers who work abroad work in an embassy and out of the embassy, so that if they are caught, the other country cannot do anything to them except send them home. They have diplomatic immunity.
Right.
I was part of one of a large group of agents called illegals, CIA operatives who worked in a country without diplomatic cover. Usually as a business person or a trader or something else that gave me a reason to be there. For instance, in Iran, I ran a construction project. And the construction project was used as a cover to bring inspecting engineers in periodically, who also happened to be intelligence officers. In that case, they were either British or Israeli or French or Italian or American. The project provided cover for all of them. The illegals are at risk. For the most part, they're at risk of being arrested, accused of being a spy, spending a couple of years in prison, and then be traded for somebody from that country who's in prison in the U.S. There's an active trading center for that sort of trade. It operates out of Geneva. But I was seldom at any real physical risk, although I was on several occasions. One, during the Vietnam War, when I was involved in doing aerial surveillance over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which was outside of Vietnam. And so if I was shot down, I was not in Vietnam, where our troops could get to me. I was in another country that sometimes was semi-hostile to the U.S., like Cambodia, which had gone communist at the time. When I was in Iran, I was at risk once the revolution happened. Before that, we were on friendly terms with the Iranian government. The Iranian government knew I was there and what I was doing, and helped, facilitated it, because we weren't really spying on Iran. We were spying on Iraq, we were spying on Russia, we were spying on Afghanistan, the neighboring countries.
Yeah. How did you reconcile? I mean, you yourself in your biography, you yourself say you were guilty of lying, subterfuge, deceit, and so on. All things that most of us would say are not very nice, and not the kind of behavior you would hope for with an adult. How do you reconcile that with your faith, your personal moral values? You were not the person. How do I put this? You were not living the life, at least publicly, that you would want to tell your children about.
That's true, except that what I was doing on behalf of my country in a situation that was either an actual war or close to war. The Cold War was really a war, even though it was not a shooting war. It was a struggle between two countries for supremacy. And used everything except for shooting to wage the war. They did it to us, we did it to them. Otherwise, we would lose, and our democracy would end. And I justified it in that way. What I was doing for my country in a war scenario, and therefore could justify it because I felt that the war was justified.
Bill, has spying, I think the second oldest profession in the world, I read that somewhere, has spying changed? I mean, you had a 30-year career. Has spying changed over the decades? Obviously, technology has had a tremendous impact.
Yes, technology has had a tremendous impact to the extent that we do not do as much in the field as we used to.
Don't have to.
And I think we're missing a lot because of that.
Oh.
There is no replacement for a man in the field to look another man in the eye and listen to what he says and judge whether what he's saying is true or not. If you get it on paper, you can't get the facial expression. We need to do more boots on the ground spying. In the lead up to the Second Gulf War, we had agents in Iraq. After the administration changed and a Democrat took the presidency, all field agents were pulled out of Iraq. And we had none in Iraq while we were trying to fight ISIS. We had to depend entirely on military intelligence within the country and on signals intelligence.
Why? I mean, why was that decision made?
The liberals do not like spying.
Because?
It puts people at risk.
True.
They don't like...
But so does not spying.
True, exactly. The problem is that they do not like to get caught.
Yeah.
And spies sometimes get caught, and it makes the administration look bad. For instance, when Francis Gary Powers was shot down in his U-2 over Russia, it created a major international incident.
Sure.
And made the Republican administration look bad.
Yeah. Well, also at that time revealed something I think most people just never thought about. Spying. That we're being spied on and we spy on other people.
Well, most people knew about it because there were lots of movies about spying.
Yeah, true.
There was a lot of spying that took place during World War II and the Korean War.
Okay. This may not be a fair question. I'm sure we're pretty good at it, the U.S. But are there other countries, other nations that are better at it, in your opinion, than we? The Israelis are usually credited with being
The Israelis are probably
very, very
the best.
Good. Yeah.
Because they have no compunction against doing illegal acts to get information. They also are willing to go assassinate somebody who is a problem. Well, it's against U.S. law for an American agent to assassinate anybody.
Yeah.
It's okay to kill somebody in self-defense or to defend somebody else, but not to take him out because he's a problem. It's something we probably ought to take a look at and develop a code for when you can and can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we still do it. We just don't have our spies do it.
Yeah.
We pay somebody else to do it.
Yeah. So other than the Israelis,
Russians, they're still very, very good at it.
and the Chinese, I would think.
The Chinese,
They've
yes.
infiltrated the whole world.
They're doing it more with their professionals working overseas than they are with professional spies.
Yeah.
They require Chinese citizens working in other countries to be spies.
I've been a consultant for more years than I care to remember. But one of the assignments I had was one of the most fascinating I ever had. I won't mention the name, but it was for a organization, institution in New York at the time that was the creation of 3 governments. And it was Japanese, North Koreans, and Americans, all engineers and diplomats and so on. When North Korea had agreed to stand down on their nuclear development, and we said we'll send heavy water over and do whatever it takes to keep peace. Well, these 3 groups had to work together, and my job was to harmonize those 3 cultures. And you can imagine what that
was fun.
It was fun. Yeah. But what I became aware of was that one of the 3 groups, and you can imagine which one it was. I mean, it was known that at the end of the day, they were reporting right back to their home country what was going on, who said what, and the individuals who were there on assignment, I believe, lived under some shadow and some concern that they might be misquoted, something they said was misunderstood, and reported back. I mean, it was just an eerie, weird world that they were living in, and I was plunked right in the middle of it, saying, let's make peace, let's be friends so we can get the job done, because they were working against one another. And in fact, they kind of hated one another ideologically. It was a fascinating assignment.
North Koreans, Chinese, until let's say 15 years ago, had problems being spies. Because the person doing the spying was always worried that his government might think he was turning.
Yes.
And take him out.
Right.
Because he was not directly under their control. And they don't like having their citizens abroad not directly under their control.
Yes. That's what I experienced. Yep.
Russia was like that too, except with their top-level spies. And the top-level spies, they believed, were loyal. Until it turned out in the 80s, 90s, that the chief of intelligence was actually working for the United States. And somebody who was a KGB person and who is now highly placed in the Soviet government was also working for the United States. I met with him in Leningrad to pick up information that he'd collected for our administration. And he was the KGB man in charge of the Leningrad area.
Let's get to your book.
All right.
The title of your book is The Man Who Was Never There. Right?
Right.
And this is the book that took 10 years to get it through
Correct.
various approvals. What motivated you to write a book? Did you make that decision on your own? Were you encouraged by other people? And how long did it take to formulate the storyline, which I'm sure it came naturally to you to some extent? Is it autobiographical, the book? Or is it
to a certain degree,
fiction?
yes. It's based on my own experiences and the experiences of people in the business that I knew.
Right.
The first book is based almost exclusively on my experiences and is pretty much paralleling the story of how I got into the espionage business. It starts with me as a child, takes me through college, into the Vietnam War, and then home from the Vietnam War. And it was at that point that I made the transition to CIA from Navy.
Right.
The book ends with that transition about to take place. So it's the lead-in to the second book,
Which is still underway.
which is still underway.
Right.
And that's not the CIA's fault, it's my fault, because I got too busy learning a living and haven't written it all. It's the publisher is ready to go with it as soon as I send them the final copy. And approvals are very easy because it is almost exclusively fiction. It is based on another guy that I knew who was not an American spy, but a British spy, who ran a brothel up in the mountains where the Ho Chi Minh Trail turns from Cambodia into South Vietnam. And it was a rest stop for the North Vietnamese soldiers getting ready to go to battle. Their last hurrah before fighting and maybe dying. And it was an extremely successful intelligence gathering method. So the second book is about that, and takes the character in the first book and puts him running that whorehouse.
Harris, I think, Arthur Harris?
Arthur Harris.
Right. And Arthur Harris is you,
basically
based on your experience.
Except in the second book, he's another guy.
Yeah. In your bio, you said something about revealing some things about Vietnam and the interagency friction, conflict within the intelligence community.
In Vietnam, the first tour, I was a Navy officer. Since I was doing intelligence gathering, I had to share the results with the CIA, the head of CIA and the embassy and the capital, who did not like what I was doing, because the Navy shouldn't be doing it, the CIA should be doing it. And he would sometimes do things that would interfere with my mission, just to make the Navy look bad.
Yes. Yeah, human nature being what it is. Yeah.
And that sort of interagency struggle continues to this day. The Army Intelligence Unit was taken away from the Army and put into this multiple agency group called the Defense Intelligence Agency, reporting to the CIA rather than to the military. So the military basically lost their own intelligence arm. And so they started a new one within the Army for field intelligence in the battlefield, because CIA can't do it, and neither can DIA. But that's a continuing, ongoing struggle between the military need for intelligence and the political need for intelligence. The CIA primarily does political intelligence for strategic thinking. Military intelligence, naval intelligence, Defense Intelligence Agency does intelligence gathering for military use.
But Bill, particularly with the technology being what it is and its capabilities, has there been an entire civilian industry that has grown up around the military?
Yes.
And it's not government or quasi-governmental, who are doing essentially what you had described earlier, the analytics.
Yes.
Data collection, analytics, prepare a report and sell it to somebody.
That goes through all the services.
Yeah.
The Office of Naval Intelligence was never subsumed into the Defense Intelligence Agency. It remained Navy and remains Navy to this day. But most of the people who work for it are not naval officers or naval personnel. They're civilian employees, sometimes borrowed from the CIA. Because the CIA has probably the best school in the world for developing analysts.
You mentioned a word. Is there a difference between spying and espionage? You mentioned espionage earlier.
Yeah, espionage
is the same.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's spying.
Where could people get a copy of your book, The Man Who Was Never There?
It's on Amazon.com.
Right.
And it can be ordered through just about any bookstore. It's with the major booksellers, but they don't stock it because it's
any prospect of being adapted for the big screen?
I keep hoping so, but I keep hoping so.
Yeah. No.
One small-time producer in New York has taken an interest in it, but he's primarily a character actor who just does a little bit of production. And it's beyond what he would be prepared to undertake, so he keeps trying to interest somebody else into going in with him.
Mm-hmm.
A classmate of mine in college, who was a good friend of mine, became a major screenwriter and producer in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And I've sent the book to him because he heard about it and asked me to.
Right.
But I haven't heard anything from him since.
But isn't it, I don't know very much about this, but isn't the probability that if there were interest, they would take your book and you probably wouldn't recognize it when it got up on the screen?
It would depend on the agreement between the studio and me.
Mm-hmm.
I would insist that I remain in an advisory role with the ability to veto certain changes.
As you look back on 30 years, would you do anything differently? Do you have any regrets?
If I had some of the knowledge I have now, I would probably have gone to work directly for the CIA after the Navy, rather than trying to keep up the Navy career.
Mm-hmm.
I would have then had a full-time CIA career, could have retired from there and started writing books a lot sooner.
Mm-hmm. That's the only regret?
Basically the only regret.
You're a lucky man.
There are small-time regrets. When I turned left on a certain street in Tehran,
yeah.
I should have turned right.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't have had to run for my life.
Uh-huh. Were there many instances like that?
A few.
A few, yeah.
But for the most part, what I did was fairly well scripted by somebody other than me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I made a mistake, it was their mistake, not mine, because I was following the script.
Knowing what you know, and as you look now at the world scene with what's going on, particularly today, you've seen the underbelly of countries, societies, cultures, political systems, and so on. Are you confident, optimistic about the future of this country?
Yes, because I think the American people are a fundamentally good people. And I say that both of the liberals and the conservatives. The extremes of both sort of go over the edge, but they're still doing what they believe in. In a lot of the other countries, like the old Soviet Union, nobody believed in what they were doing. They kept doing it because they didn't know how to change it without creating huge upheaval. And they loved the motherland even if they didn't love the government.
Yes.
And that's still the case in Russia.
Apparently, from what the reports we're receiving now. Yes.
And in Ukraine, for instance.
Yes, certainly the Ukraine.
Eastern Europe tends to have a much more emotional tie to the motherland than Westerners. The motherland is, for them, their people.
What about the Middle East? Can the same be said for the Middle East? Is the allegiance to the motherland, or is it to an ideology?
There's very little adherence to the motherland in the Middle East. A person is loyal first to his family, second to his tribe, third to his region, which is an assembly of tribes, fourth to his country. But somewhere in the mix, close to the top, is allegiance to his faith.
Yes.
As he understands it.
Yes. I have said for years and believe that the West will always be at a disadvantage because we don't understand the Eastern mind.
Right.
We don't understand it. We can't fathom it.
And we don't understand tribalism.
No. I remember we used to say years ago that China always had the advantage because they took the long view, the 300-year strategic plan. I don't think that's changed.
It is not.
And as long as that's the case, I don't see how we can come together because we're not on the same page and we never will be. Well, that's another discussion.
If we were to come together, I think it would have to start on the business end. because their businesses also take the long view and ours don't.
Yes.
And so it is hard for an American business to partner with a Chinese business because we look at the next quarter's results.
Yes.
And they look at, the next 100 years.
Yes.
Where do I want this company to go?
Yeah. I did, again, an interesting study years ago, and it was the study of the Japanese management systems compared to the Western, the U.S., and the extent to which the U.S. had changed the way Japan was doing business. And it was really fascinating that we had westernized the way Japanese were doing business.
Up to a point.
And there wasn't much difference after a while, a couple of generations. Wasn't much difference between, except for the bowing, which of course the cultural things.
Right.
But it was absolutely fascinating that it had been homogenized that way.
But the other thing we need to understand, and this applies to almost all of the Asian cultures, until very recently they were all feudal. The local lord was the guy you took care of, reported to, fought for. If he fought for the country, you fought for the country.
Right.
If he fought the lord in the next county, you fought the lord in the next county. Business started in Japan on the feudal model. The feudal chiefs became the business chiefs.
Right.
And that is still true in Japan to a large extent. The major companies are controlled by 5 families.
Yes. I wish we had more time. It's been fascinating. Thank you very much for coming. The book again is The Man Who Was Never There, and is available on Amazon and other publishers. Go on the internet. And we'll await your next book. We'll have you back. I hope it won't take 10 years.
The next book will be called The House of Beloved Skillful Beauty.
The House of Beloved Skillful Beauty. Oh, the brothel. Oh,
right.
Okay, I got it.
That was what the brothel was actually called.
Thanks, Bill. Bill Wheatley has been my guest today. Thanks very much for watching. Until next time, take very good care of yourselves